Hi, I'm Alison Beckles, and you are listening to Best Fails, the podcast where we share our stories of failure, explore their impact, and reflect on what we learned. Today's guest is Lynda Richards, who struggled with feelings of failure despite her many successes. Her story is a reminder that the path to achievement is rarely a straight line. So let's get into it. So welcome, Lynda, to Best Fails. It is such a pleasure to have you participating in this season of Best Fails. Thank you for joining us. So just to give you a bit of an overview of who Lynda is a researcher and consultant. She is the instructional designer and researcher for Inspire Leadership Solutions. She has MSc in counseling psychology, and she also has undergrad training in biology and theology. Lynda is not just a brilliant researcher and instructional designer, but she is also mother to three beautiful children who are 5, 3, and 1. So before we get any more into your story or we talk about your story, let's get to know you a little bit better. So tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, your family life, all of that kind of stuff.
Hi everyone, I am Lynda and I grew up in Guyana. I grew up with my mom and dad and my two sisters. We're a very close-knit family. I think one of the hallmarks of my family was the emphasis my parents played on education, on academic excellence. That was the drive for everything. But there were also moments of fun. So one of the things that I really love is the outdoors and nature and just the environment, animals, anything. So that's something that I really enjoy. Word games, playing. So that was basically what my life was like: climbing trees, catching grasshoppers, riding bikes, cricket on the streets, and ensuring that you did well in school because then that would be problematic. So yeah.
I I am like, look, Caribbean parents, right? When it comes to education, Caribbean parents don't play. You better go to school
And
and
not
learn. Exactly. So this is a podcast about failure. So I am curious to know, like, what was your earliest memory of failure growing up?
So I will have to go with an academic failure. So growing up, throughout primary school, I will always get second in class. Like there was just this one guy. I remember his name. I'm not gonna say it, but he would always get first. And every time I took home my report, my mother's response would be, "You got second again?" And I started to feel like this second place was like this horrible thing. I mean, I'm in a class of 30 something children. I get second, and I'm feeling really bad because I didn't get first. But what really jumped out to me about that failure is later on in life, I just was looking for something and I found some of my old reports from primary school. Now, my mother would complain that I was getting second all the time,
Mhm.
but I was getting second with 98%, 99% overall for the entire year. And I'm thinking, I had so much pressure on myself for bringing second, but clearly this guy was on a level because nobody celebrated the quality of my second. It was just, you got second.
Oh
And yeah,
man.
so I think that resonated with me a lot. Like,
I will call the name of the person that was that for me. Her name was Janelle Warren. And Janelle came first all the time. And no matter how hard I tried, I could not beat Janelle Warren. Oh my goodness. So how about, so that's your mom and the experience within your family. And if we put it, because you kind of gave a context that education was really important to your family, so we can see the pressure coming from mom as far as that is concerned. But when you think about your wider community, whether or not it was the community in which you grew up and lived, whether or not it was, you know your the community at school, like when it came to failure, how did you find people responded to failure within your wider community?
I don't know if I can speak broad stroke for the Caribbean, but
Sure.
at least in Guyana there still remains the a value to academic excellence is still
Yeah.
really esteemed. And so I think there was always this ingrained culture, like if you are the best, if you are smart, then you are better than other people.
Yeah.
And so that was emphasized to the academics. And when it came to sports or games, there was still this idea that you always had to win. There was
Mm-hmm.
still a level
Mm-hmm.
of joking about who came last, who didn't look the best.
Yeah.
And so we always kind of made fun about that. So failure always had this taboo, like this stain on it. To
Yeah.
fail meant that you weren't good enough, that something was wrong with you or
Yeah.
inherently wrong. And I don't know if I just internalized and that became my perception of the community because of how school was for me and my family and stuff. But I don't know that we talked about failure and guided people through failure effectively. It always became
Mm-hmm.
this, um, this disparaging thing that we needed to avoid. And if people
Yeah.
were failures, then we wrote them off completely, like there was no hope.
Yeah.
So we really wronged and recover from that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, like as you were talking, the thought that came to me is what failure represents within the community. And it almost sounds as if failure represents anything that was not first place. Anything that was not number one was then considered a failure. Like, does that feel true for you or not so much so?
Probably in my own academic experience, but on a wider
Yeah.
scale, I don't think it's necessarily you have to be first. Like you have to be
Mm-hmm.
first. You just have to be excellent or perceived
Yes.
as excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Being in the community, for example, where you have the right jobs, you have the right careers. You may
Yeah.
not be the best doctor, but you're a doctor, so that means you
Right.
are top tier.
Yeah.
So it just
Yeah.
means fitting into communities or identified social strata that defined you as a success, that made you somebody of value. And if you didn't
Yeah.
hit those targets or you didn't meet that mark, then you are basically nobody. So
Yeah.
there was always this
Yeah.
sort of social demarcation. So I think it was more an alignment with a particular community and what that community
Right.
represented rather than being first. And then when you get into those communities, then you look at who is the best and who is not the
Yeah.
best. And then you have those levels here. So just
Yeah.
creating the standard and the
Yeah. So, before we get into your story, I've got a little bit of a game for us to play.
okay.
So I've got my where should we begin cards. And basically what we will do is that um I am going to choose just 3 cards from this group of cards that we will both answer questions. We'll answer questions to. Because it is my game, I will answer first and put that
Okay.
pressure on myself to give you some time to think. Right, so let's see what card we will have. This is a nice one. The first time I saw my parents as human was, and the immediate recollection that came to me was of my father. So my father was a bodybuilder, nice and tough and strong. My father is not a man that used to get sick or anything like that. And I remembered, like in my late teens, I think it was like about 19 or so, my father caught, it was, well, we thought it was a cold or something like that. And I remember a night, we were sleeping, we just heard a crash in the house. Everybody get up and run, and my father had fainted in the living room. Lynda, look, right? I was so petrified. It was so shocking to me that this man who know how to lift weights, all kind of weights, who has never been laid up and sick, who could do anything, fainted on the and is laying down on the ground, unconscious or whatever. That and the thing about it is he was the only person in the family at the time who had the ability to drive. So we had a car there, and nobody else but daddy, who is on the ground, could drive. And I got I went and got my permit the next week. I started to learn to drive immediately. But I never, that honestly is my first recollection of seeing my parents as human.
Yeah.
How about you? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's probably from based on your story. I think for me is also my father and seeing him in a place where he was incapacitated as well because he
Yeah.
had eaten something. He got really bad food poisoning. And so he had to be in a wheelchair. He couldn't do anything for himself. And that was the first time I saw that my father could be weak. I mean, I knew it. He was sick before. He would have colds, just
Yeah.
small things. But to see him in a place where he had to depend on somebody and he had to rely on help where I've never really noticed that before.
Yeah.
I think that was the first time I appreciated that he wasn't superhuman and he could be weak and imperfect and need help and have to rely on other people for support. So I think that was a moment for me. And another time, because we're a Christian family as well,
Yeah.
my mother was at the altar when I was a little girl, and I
Yeah.
saw her crying. And I was like, mothers could cry? I don't know why she was crying. I don't know what was going on, but it was just like the
Yeah.
first time I ever saw her cry.
Cray.
And I
Yeah.
think that made me realize that maybe she can have feelings too.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
And I was really young at the time. So
Yeah.
So I think those two experiences just shocked me into the reality that yes, they're older, yes, they do everything for me, but they're human, they feel and
Yeah.
they get sick and they're weak
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So let's do one more question. Hmm. I still feel like I need to impress.
Hmm.
I think like when the situations are new, I feel like I need to impress. That's the honest to goodness truth. Like, and it is only I think as I have gotten into my 40s that I have begun to feel less of that need. But I have always walked around feeling like I need to show that I am the expert at this. That I have all this knowledge. I went to school and I
Yeah.
got my bachelor's and I got a master's with a distinction and they got a second master's and they started a business and they all of this kind of stuff. Well, though on the inside, some of it, I know that I was doing these things, but some of it didn't connect necessarily to who I felt like I was as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Like it didn't connect to like this is my truth, or I felt like I was actually doing these things. And coming out of that, I used to kind of maybe just think that I had a lot of book knowledge, but I wasn't very good necessarily at making that book knowledge into like real tangible things. So like going into my job here, the job that I have now, I had at the back of my mind, oh my goodness, I'm going into this HR job. I've done HR things before, but I was never really internal HR. I'm doing this
Mm-hmm.
degree because I need to be able to prove I gotta have something behind me to say I've got this knowledge. And I want to be able to prove, oh my goodness, that I can do this and that I know this and so forth. And I think when I get into situations like that where I am maybe unsure about my position in the situation, and where too maybe I feel less confident about my ability, then that need to impress comes up real strongly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm becoming better at it, but it still comes up. That's the honest to goodness truth.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think it's still connected to my childhood, so there's
Yeah.
always a need to impress when it's associated with work or anything
Mm-hmm.
that I have to deliver.
Yes.
So I always have to ensure that it's perfect, that it's well done, that
Yes.
there are hardly any errors or stuff. So whenever there is something that I have to do that's connected to work or academics or something, I always feel that there is these invisible people that don't really exist, but they do exist in some world who will be assessing and judging the quality of what I'm doing. So I always
Yes.
feel like I have to do my best in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I understand. This was great. That was quite interesting, and it made me think about things I hadn't think about, like that thing about when was like the first time you've seen your parents as human? Like I have never ever thought about that. So it is at this point in time that we will get into your story and your failure story. So Linda, over to you to share.
Okay. So for me, I believe that in order to be successful, everything had to work out perfectly. And
Mm,
considering my childhood and my upbringing, I mean, even though it wasn't said explicitly, that's how I interpreted everything that was said to me. So always being second place was a problem. You always had
mm-hmm.
to be in the smart group. These were the jobs that were valued and appreciated. So you have to work towards that. And if you didn't meet that target, then you were not successful. So I set up this perception and this ideal in my life based on the interpretation of my environment that everything has to work out perfectly in order for me to be successful. And
Mm-hmm.
if it didn't, it meant that I failed completely. And I carried that with me in many areas of my life. So even now, I still struggle to understand that it's okay. You can breathe a bit, you know. You
Yes.
can breathe a bit, you can relax. You don't have to put so much pressure
Yeah.
on yourself to have everything paneled perfectly.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Barbados, I moved with all of that, I would like to say arrogance, for
Mm-hmm.
lack of a better word,
Okay.
because I went to a secondary school that was the top secondary school in Guyana. And
Mm-hmm.
to get there, it felt like you had arrived because for throughout primary school, that's what we were working for. You want to
Yeah.
go to one of the best schools. You guys call it grammar schools here.
Yes.
Um, so I went to college in Guyana, and that was like, yeah, you got it. You
Mm.
made it. You have now reached the pinnacle of success.
Yeah.
And that was really what was said to us on various occasions by different teachers. You are the best in
Well,
Guyana. This is, you are going to be
yeah.
the next leaders. So there was always that ingrained perspective that you
Yeah.
have made it here, then you're the best. And then I went to university. Um, I graduated. I moved on to Caribbean Nazarene College, won Best Student Awards, won scholarships, got scholarships to attend university to do my master's. And so like, I have all of these experiences and thinking, okay, I have done everything perfectly. Well,
Yes.
in a sense, I've
Yes.
done
Yeah.
everything that I should do.
Yeah.
I am maybe not academically the best student, but I am within that category or within
Yeah.
that bracket.
You're
So
in that
that
top.
means now I can move on and coast through life and I would achieve the level of success that I think I should achieve
Yeah.
in my career and in my profession. But that for me was a rude awakening when I came to Barbados because I would send out resume and CVs and get no responses. And here I'm thinking, but I have done everything right. I've done everything that I am supposed to do. I have done all of the things that they said I should do. I am one of the best people in this world. I went to Queen's College. What is going on here? And but then I started to internalize that because for me, I had created these values and ideals that said this is what your life should look like when you're successful. Successful people are not unemployed. Successful people are
Mm-hmm.
not struggling to find work. Successful people
Mm-hmm.
have these professions and they are excelling at their jobs and they make this
Yeah.
salary and this is how they live their lives. They have this home, they have these investments, they can wear designer clothes. This is
Mm.
what success looks like. And then you're not here. What's happening? And I started to
Yeah.
internalize um, what was happening in my experiences is though I was a failure because things didn't work
Mm-hmm.
out the way I expected them to, and they didn't match what I perceived was valuable. It meant that
Yeah.
I was a failure, that I was not good
Mm.
enough. And as a result, I started to withdraw and I
Yeah.
got really depressed and I wouldn't even I couldn't even talk or like be in circles because I felt like I wasn't good enough, and
Yeah.
even though people, I don't think anybody perceived me like that, but that is how I
Mm-hmm.
perceived myself. And I started to wear that failure as a badge, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it just reminded me of something that I read in C.S. Lewis, like The Last Battle. I'm in love with the Chronicles of Narnia and fantasy
Yeah.
books. But one of the things that stood out to me from that book was there was a part of it toward the end where there were these group of dwarves who were sitting in a like they're in a beautiful field, and they had a lush table before them on the path to, let's say, heaven, but they couldn't see that because they were trapped in their minds. They just saw and they just thought that they were in a dirty, filthy horse stable. And for the first few years of my life in Barbados, because I wasn't living up to the ideals and expectations that I had set for myself, that I thought represented success, I was in an island that people died to be a part of, that, you know, save up so much to come to. I was surrounded by opportunities. I was still gifted. I still had all the talents and all the knowledge, but I couldn't see it because I had imprisoned myself in a space that said, if I don't achieve life the way it's supposed to be, then I'm not good enough, then I'm a failure. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that started to shift for me when I started to remove my experiences and my unemployment from my identity. Because
Mm-hmm.
I was unemployed, it didn't shift who I was. I didn't stop having all the knowledge that I had. It didn't erase my talents and my giftings and my ability. I could still add purpose. I could still add value to this world, which is what I wanted to do. So how can I do this? And so I would always volunteer, but I started to take that more seriously. Even if I don't get the job that I want, I don't get responses, I could still work. I could still add
Mm-hmm.
value. Um, let's look at where I am right now. I could learn anything. What's
Mm-hmm.
happening in Barbados? What are the
Mm-hmm.
career options? What are the things that people are looking for that I could start learning? And so I would just every year set a learning plan for myself. That's how I ended up in monitoring and evaluation, because I would look at all these ads for jobs, and I would see monitoring and evaluation. I was like, I could do that. I'm a researcher. I could get that done. And so
Yeah.
I started to create jobs and paths for myself. But more importantly, I started to pay attention to the prison I had built for myself and realize that because I experienced this, let's say, roadblock or this obstacle in my path, in my profession, it doesn't mean that I am an inherent failure, and it doesn't mean that I will continue to fail. And so I started to shift my perspective of what a good profession has to look like. A good profession or
Mm-hmm.
being successful doesn't mean that I have to work for other people. I can create my own job. If y'all don't want to hire me, I will hire myself. And so built, I created my own consultancy, and I started to
Yeah.
do that. And I started through volunteering and connections. I started to work and have, create that path for myself. And so it was important for me, I think, to understand that yes, you may have ideals, but success isn't linear and life isn't linear, and there are
Mm-hmm.
always going to be gray areas. And more importantly, believing that you're a failure doesn't mean that that's an accurate belief. And you have to be able to stop and assess where you are and reframe where you're going as well. But one of the other things I think that is really important as I consider and I thought through my own perceptions of failure was, even if I am a failure, so what?
Right.
I have the
Mm-hmm.
choice now. I have the choice now to decide where I'm going to go.
Yep.
And so there was a book I was reading about acceptance and just a psychology theory. But based on that, they were talking about learning to accept where you are now. That everything you've done in life has brought you to a particular place. Now you get to determine where you're going and how you're moving forward. And so that is what I started to do. This is where I am
Yeah.
right now. Am I going to
Yeah.
stay here and wallow and be, oh, woe is me, for the rest of my life? Or am I going to decide that
Yeah.
this is where I want to go, and this is how I want to move forward. And so I just created a 5-year plan for my life and decided that this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to move forward. And I have consistently allowed my failures to become platforms rather than prisons. So if I don't succeed at something, I take some time. Yes, I still have to struggle with the whole perfectionist mentality, but I take some time to where I am and decide, okay, I didn't hit the target that I set for myself here, for my career, for my profession, for my life, for my parenting. Um, how am I going to move forward from here? What's the best course of action to take? So I have learned through this experience how to turn my failures into lessons and to
Yeah.
strengthen my resilience to keep going, because it was something that I had never learned throughout my life, because I had always done
Mm.
well. I had always gotten into the right spaces. So I never really had to grapple with failure per se. Even
Yeah.
when I failed,
Yeah.
I it wasn't an overall failure that put a halt on my life. So moving to
Yes.
Barbados was the first time I understood what it meant to not be good enough or to not feel
Right.
good enough.
Yeah.
And that experience taught me how to strengthen your resilience and understand that failure isn't a full stop. It's something
Yeah.
that I taught all my life. Like I always had to be perfect, because if I failed, then that was the end of me.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm here now, and it's not what I envisioned my life to be. But I'm working and I'm doing really well, and I have the flexibility to be at home and to meet with you during the day. I don't
Yes.
have a 9 to 4 day,
Yeah.
but I'm doing really well, and I'm loving what I'm doing. And I was only able to do that because some people did not respond to my CVs. And for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
life is better than I thought it could have been, because
Wow.
success isn't linear, and
Yeah.
success doesn't mean everything has to work out perfectly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So I've got a couple questions for you. So, and I'm gonna kind of go from what you said just now. So what is your new definition of success then? What is your new definition of success?
I don't know that I have crafted a definition per se,
Yeah.
but I'm just gonna steal from Dario and Imran and Inspire,
Yeah.
and talk about success being living out your full potential or maximizing your potential.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, it's what my father would always say: bloom wherever you're planted. If you
Oh,
are down in the doldrums, you make the best of it.
blue.
You know,
Yes.
if you are in top, you make the best of it. And I think that is what true success has to be. It has to be connected to where you are at, to the resources you have available to you, and use where you are and what you have to do your best and to add value. So you always become a lighthouse wherever you are. You're always
Yeah.
um, adding value and maximizing your purpose and potential. So for
Yeah.
me, that is success,
Yeah.
because it doesn't box us into anything.
Yeah. I love that whole idea of blooming wherever you are, wherever that is going to be. It is about blooming. Um, when you were talking, you mentioned a few things that just kind of help to give perspective. So you talked about, the book from C.S. Lewis and the different things that you would have read and so forth. But I'm curious as to whether or not there was any single one thing that caused you to stop and think about the way that you were perceiving failure, and made you rethink it, or if it was maybe just a series of things.
I think it was a just a series, just ruminations, going through processing and stuff. But there is also Dario, my husband, who would see
Yeah.
me in these states and be like, "Belinda, you overdoing it now. I mean, come on." Um, so I think his cheerleading
Yeah.
was what really nudged me out of a lot of my, pity party and woe is
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
Just him reinforcing and reminding me that because you are not employed or you're not getting the job that you want doesn't mean that you can't have a career and you can't add
Yes.
value. You are
Yeah.
gifted and smart enough to create your own career and create your own
Yeah.
space. So rather than sit here and wallow, what can you do to take charge of your life?
Yeah.
So I think those words were helpful,
Yes.
but also just continuing the process and knowing that because work for me isn't just about the salaries. Like I believe that everybody should add value and should make a difference in the world. So
Yeah.
even though I couldn't get a job, I found spaces to volunteer and found things to do, but it still wasn't good enough because it wasn't the job, you know? So just
Right.
changing my perspective. Dario helped me to change my perspective and to appreciate where I was and to appreciate
Yeah.
that I was still adding value. I was still making a difference, and that I was creating expectations that were unfair and were
Yeah.
unrealistic, and I wasn't being gracious and compassionate with where I was and myself.
Yeah.
And so I think he really was a catalyst in how I transitioned and how I started to perceive myself
Yeah. Yeah.
in the entire situation.
I know that you said earlier as well that you kind of withdrew, as things as you weren't getting the responses and so forth, you kind of withdrew. Like how did would you say your experience of feeling like a failure impacted your relationship with others, whether or not it was your children, even with Dario, who's your husband, maybe with your family, your parents and so forth? Did you find that it impacted the way that you maybe responded and connected with the other people in your life?
Um, well, not really my children, because I had started to shift a lot of my perspectives when I had my first child.
Mm,
So I had started to grow my consultancy like 5 years ago,
right.
and
Yeah.
just started to be intentional about crafting my work. But with my parents and my family, I always felt um, ashamed, like I wasn't
Mm,
good enough, and I don't think that they um, put that on me. It was just that I grew up with this expectation um, that this is what success looks like and this is who successful people are, which is real folly, you know? So I would feel like I needed to. I needed to tell them about this project I'm working on, or I needed to um, have this perfect career to be accepted and to feel like you're really valued, because I have, yeah, as I said, education was really important. So I have a sister who's a lawyer and another one who's an engineer, and they're doing really well, and I
mhm.
feel like, well, what am I? I'm unemployed. Like
All
what?
right.
How
Yes.
can I go to home and have, like, I feel like, but I think that was something that was internal. Like I perceived that they would be disappointed,
Mm,
and I took that and I carried that with me, and that framed a lot of the conversations, and it made me feel uncomfortable to even be home or to talk about what was happening.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's why I said for me it was more the perception of being a failure rather than really feeling, and
Yes.
that is more harmful because we miss, like I said from CS Lewis, we miss the gardens that we're sitting in because we allow our minds to tell us we are in filthy stables. And I
Yeah.
was doing that to myself
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
long part of my life.
Yeah. And it is like, and it just reminds me of what you had said earlier too about identity, where you were talking about, having to remove the experience or the situations that you were experiencing and separate it out from your identity. And I, I would like you to talk a little bit more about your process for doing that, because I know, like, for a lot of people, depending on, especially if the failure happens within the sphere of their career, or for parts of them where that identity is really strong, then it almost feels as if that's when it comes to that feeling of like, I have failed, because that failure has threatened that identity that is so strong for me. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that separation you did and what you went through to kind of separate. the experience from Lynda being a failure?
Yeah, I don't think that there was one moment. I think there it was like a process, just a series of different experiences that I had along the way. And when you connect with people and you hear their stories, it helps you to have a better perspective of where you are at. And so just through volunteering and working and ministry and church, I was able to connect with people who had, for lack of a better phrase, not to diminish anything that I was going through, but who had real problems.
Right.
Amid their problems and their challenges, there was still a level of confidence and resilience. And that made me so interested in understanding how people navigate challenges and are still able to emerge successfully. Because, as I said, before Barbados, I don't think that there was anything really that I can say that I failed so drastically in. For most of my life, I didn't understand what it meant to fail. I mean, yes, getting second, but I mean, I got second with 98%, so I it wasn't
Yeah,
like a big
that is not a failure.
problem, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So, but
yeah.
but just listening to the experiences of people made me interested in understanding how we navigate challenges and pain and struggles and are still resilient, still able to enjoy life. So I started to explore that a bit more. I started to read the book of Philippians more intentionally because I was interested in Paul as well and just his idea that we can rejoice in all circumstances. Like, Paul, you're telling me to rejoice in my unemployment. How am I supposed to do this when I am here, when I am a failure? And just looking at how he navigated and the words that he used in his writing, um, helped me to understand that I am allowing my circumstance to define me and to tell me who I am. And because I'm doing that, I'm not able to rejoice. If I hinge my joy on something that is more permanent and lasting, it's easier for me to navigate this process. And then, as I said, Dario as well, just giving me reality checks. So there was just different circumstances and experiences, and also being a psychology student, that helped me to
Yeah,
realize I
yeah.
cannot define myself based on my circumstance. So I started to change what I was saying. I am not
Mm,
where I want to be. I'm not where I would like to be in my career, but that doesn't mean I'm a failure, or that doesn't mean I
yeah,
have to remain here. I
yeah,
still have agency, I still have control, and I can take charge. So I wouldn't hinge it to one thing per se.
yeah. That when you say that, it made me think. I came across this definition of failure that somebody was using for students. Like if they failed a particular class or they failed a particular topic or whatever, the rather than saying that it was a fail or given the mark or whatever, they would say, "Oh, this person is not ready yet." So that was
As
all.
yet,
That's it.
yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is yet. It is. Oh, it's not that you are not at all. It is that you just aren't there yet. So come back. It means to come back again.
Yeah.
And that stood out when you were talking about it just now. But the other thing that stood out so clearly to me is that it sounded like you stopped being self-focused because you started volunteering, you started paying attention to the stories of others, to the situations of others, you started looking outside of yourself as opposed to being internally focused, where again, if it isn't looking good on the inside, it's kind of like then you get yourself trapped in those like unclean stables from the C.S. Lewis book. But it sounds like a major thing that you did as well that just kind of helped was that you started looking outwards as opposed to being internal. And I just think that's like a really good, that's a great strategy for helping oneself to recover from that experience of failure and so forth. Um, for you, what would you say, just kind of thinking back, because you've talked a lot about these things as well that kind of worked for you. So you had, encouragement from Dario, and there were the books that you were reading and so forth. Um, is there anything else that you would add in terms of your own recovery that really helped, that stands out, something that you haven't mentioned as yet?
Okay. I think gratitude. When you
Right.
said as yet, I remembered a lot of some of the books that I was reading at that time, and my interest in psychology is on positive psychology.
Yes.
So
Same.
I started to, yeah, I love positive psychology. It's so amazing.
Yeah, me
But because
too.
of my interest in resilience
Yeah.
and all of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
I think gratitude as well. So there were moments in that time that I just started to document what I was thankful for, and I would journal. So I'm like, I don't get much time to do it anymore. But
Yeah.
in that period of my life, I was
Yeah.
journaling a lot, and I would intentionally focus on things that I am grateful for, and
Hmm.
things that I can celebrate in the moment.
Hmm.
So my life did not become so all consumed by my failure, and I think that's what, or my perceived failure. I think that's what we tend to do a lot. We allow the problem to consume our entire lives and to penetrate every aspect of our lives, and
Yeah.
that becomes problematic because then it
Yeah.
narrows our focus, so everything we see is through that lens. So
Yeah.
adding gratitude and realizing that, there are other parts of my life that I'm doing really well in, that I'm hitting the
Yeah.
targets I want, that I'm
Yeah.
feeling fulfilled in, helped me to realize
Yes.
that this was just a subset of my life and it wasn't everything. I had magnified the problem so much because I zoomed into it. So zooming
Yes.
out with gratitude and celebrating the other things that were happening, I think that really helped to give perspective. Even
Oh,
now,
nice.
um, so I may not have everything that I want, but because I'm missing one thing, it doesn't negate the 99 good things that are happening in my life. So I think adding
Yeah.
gratitude and a
Yeah.
perspective of gratitude, a lens through which we look at our experiences and we look at our lives, gives us a much better footing to navigate failure and to be resilient and to bounce back from challenges.
So one of the things that I am also very interested in is the resources that people have around them to help them to recover
Yeah.
from failure. So there are those internal resources, for example, the gratitude books, the things that you were doing as a person. But one of the other things that I'm
Mm-hmm.
also very curious about is what resources people have. So I know that you talked about Dario as, a person who really just had the right words and the right type of encouragement as well to help you to have a different perspective. Um, when you think about working through the failure situation as well and your feelings of failure, were there any other people that come to mind that you would say would be like an unsung hero for helping you through the process?
Yeah. So when it comes to, for me, I think it's having a really good community. So persons from my church, I think in Hope Road Nazarene, I think they really helped me, like Pauline and Anne, and there was a woman I would go to every Wednesday, Sister Strickland, and we would pray together and we do Bible study together. I mean, just those small moments, I think really
Yes.
helped to add value, and they added so much to my life, and they still do. But then there are other persons, and you're one of them, Ali. So that gave or provided opportunities or platforms for me to serve and for me to
Yeah.
use my gifts and talents. Um, well, Dario again through Inspire, Dario and
Yeah.
Imran, just
Yeah.
providing job opportunities and connecting me. So even the things that I was able to do, I never got it because I applied for it.
Right.
It was because I continued to work. I was volunteering, so I built up my skills even if nobody was paying me to do it, and those
Yeah.
open doors and opportunities. So there's just a number of persons, Corey, Warrell, just different people that saw the value that I could bring and provided opportunities. My lecturer at university as well, when I wasn't working, she brought me onto a project. So I had helped her to write a paper and get published. So even though I have no published papers, I had helped her, and she just brought me into a lot of what she was doing as well and opened doors for me. So I think just having a really good community of persons is important, but also not sitting back and waiting for things to happen, because I was always
Mm,
working and I was always doing something, and even if I wasn't paid for it, I was still doing something.
yes.
People saw
Yeah.
that. They reached out to me, and that's how I was able to move past and to build the consultancy that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love the whole idea of community. And then you know that there are people who might not have, a community or a strong community around them to provide them with the type of support and so forth that, that you are sharing about, and that even I have experienced, as I've gone through my own failure situation and so forth. But there is such a value in just having one person. I remember I came across this study, and it had to do with ACEs, like adverse, oh gosh, what's it called? Adverse childhood experiences is I think
Okay.
is the thing for it. And this the guy that I was listening to, he was just saying that when it comes to children who are having like really adverse childhoods, like the things that make a difference is just having one stable person throughout their life. It doesn't have to be a family member. It does not
Yeah.
have to
Mhm.
be, it could be somebody at school. It could be somebody in their neighborhood, but all they need is one
Mhm.
person who is stable in their life. And I think about that as well. And think about the fact that, you know, honestly, like even here within the Isle of Man, my stability really is Wendell. He is my one stable person that helps to keep me
Yeah.
grounded and so forth. So, just find that one person, that one person. They don't have to go into anything deep with you or anything like that, but they are just that
Yeah.
stability, that person that when you meet up with them, when you see them, whatever, it offers you just that point of stability. So I love the community and the community aspect of the conversation. We've gone through a lot. We've talked a lot. And we are basically towards the end of the conversation. But for you, Lynda, is there anything that you would want to share to a person who's similar to you, may have had expectations of what their lives would look like and what success would look like, and they're going through the process of kind of reevaluating and kind of moving away from thinking about themselves as a failure? Like, what would you want to share with them?
Um, I would say the first thing I would say is self-compassion. I think we have to be gracious with ourselves. We have to extend the same patience and love that we would extend to somebody else to ourselves. And many times we are harsher on ourselves than on other people. So I would say lead with compassion. Approach the situation with a level of grace
Yeah.
as you navigate the challenges and the failures that you're experiencing. The second thing is acceptance. So you want to lead with self-compassion, but you also want to accept that this is where I am. And that's really important because everything that you would have done would have brought you to this place. This is where I am now. And in accepting that, you're not accepting to stay, you're accepting to move. So now that I'm here, take some time to carefully consider, where do I want to go next? Where is this journey going to take me tomorrow? Where do I want it to lead for the future? And because you have accepted where you are, you're bringing all the lessons that you would have learned in the past and from your failures, and you're taking it with you and you're using it as a springboard as you go forward. So self-compassion, acceptance, and then the final thing is resilience. Approach your
Mhm.
failure not as a full stop, but as just a chapter in your book. Because many times we can turn failures into our entire story. And then we
Mm.
craft a story that says, this is who I am. And
Yes.
so we block out and blot out all the other chapters before. We don't give ourselves room to write new chapters for our lives. This becomes our story. So I would say approach your failures with a level of resilience where you understand this is just a chapter of the journey. I'm going to close this chapter now and I'm moving forward. And if you do that with self-compassion, you understand that everything isn't going to work out perfectly. And when it doesn't, I'm going to be patient with myself, and I'm going to take some time to consider what changes do I need to make to ensure that this new chapter that I'm on is going to lead to better outcomes.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't lead to the outcomes that I want, what can I continue to do? How can I continue to build to move forward? And finally, have a healthy community, because life isn't going to be
Yeah.
perfect. Everything isn't going to pan out the way you want. And for perfectionists in the world, I know it's a struggle. Everything isn't going to pan out the way you want it to. So surround yourself with people that you can laugh with, that you can enjoy life with, that you can be vulnerable with, that you can talk about the challenges and the struggles that you're experiencing with. So those are the four things: self-compassion, be patient, accept where you are, not as a place to stay, but as a springboard to keep going. Um, Continue to embrace resilience. This isn't the full stop in your life. There are opportunities. You are here, so you can come back from
Yeah.
this. So build to go forward and surround yourself with a healthy community.
Yeah, I love that, especially a community that you can laugh at yourself with, because sometimes we take
Yeah.
ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, and one that's not afraid to tell you, hey, you had enough time to cry about this problem. Now it's time to get up and move on. So we need
Exactly.
that community in our life. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Linda, thank you so very much. This
Thank you,
was
Ali.
great. You know, like so much of what you said resonated with me because it is very similar to my own story of feeling like a failure. And it just makes me think about the definition that I think about for failure, which is basically a failure is that gap between the hope that you have for the outcome that you would like to achieve and the reality of what you have actually achieved. It really is that gap. And sometimes like the failures that we feel or what we feel as a failure might be is more so that we have not met an expectation that we've set for ourselves, or we
Yeah.
haven't met a hope that we've set for ourselves. So thank you so very much for being
Thank you,
vulnerable
Ali.
and sharing this story. And I know for sure it will encourage people, because I know there are lots of people who battle with, oh my goodness, I have not made it to where I was thinking that I would be. And you gave wonderful advice and perspective on how they can begin to really move forward and move away from that thinking and that idea. So thank you very much, Lynda.
Thank you.
Lynda, thank you so much for telling us your story. Now, if you want to connect with Lynda, check out our show notes for details. If you enjoy the podcast and want to support us, tell a friend or leave a review on your favorite podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube at Bestville's Podcast. Now, if you have your own Bestville story that you would like to share, send us an email at info@mybestvilles.com. Have you had a similar experience to Lynda? I would love to hear about it. What was your major takeaway from the experience? Write us a note or record a voice memo and send it to us at info@mybestvilles.com, and we might display it on a future episode. If you are navigating or processing a failure and would like a safe space to reflect and explore on what it means for you, visit our show notes to book some time with me. And remember, shame dies when stories are told in safe places. Until next time.